Hello, I'm Toycat, and Trump's tariffs came into effect over the weekend, and this has led to an economic shockwave which has come all around the world. And now, as markets open today, the big headline is that the UK's stock exchange is at a one-year low, Asian markets are suffering their worst day in decades, and as European share prices plunge, you might think that the US is therefore gaining at the cost of all of these other countries, but actually no, the US is also going down, US futures are sharply down, and indeed there are many companies which are actively losing from this. And so, given that every economist has said from the beginning that no one loses in a tariff war, especially when it's reciprocated, it raises the question of what exactly is the end game here, and also who is it that is gaining right now? Because for every winner there is usually a loser, and so for every loser, is there a winner? In this case, it's a little bit trickier to see, but let's start with the losers because they're very easy to point at. If you have UK or French or German or Hong Kong stocks, they're probably down by about 10 to 15% this morning. And it's not just stocks in those markets, it's also stocks inside of the United States. Interestingly enough, you can see that it's not just the Hang Seng and all of the other Asian stock markets. US markets are expected to go down at least 3 to 4%, and this is lower than those other drops, but still quite low in that case. Also, you can see that it's not just, like traditional investments. Cryptocurrency is down quite a bit. Bitcoin is down 7%, Ethereum is down 18%, and in other words, basically every major asset is down because the world is looking like a less stable place. This also has the interesting knock-on effect of meaning that oil is down, and so another loser from this is actually, therefore, Russia. Russia and any other OPEC country, but basically any country in the world that has a decent amount of petroleum as its primary export, all of these countries are going to be suffering because their biggest export, their money maker, what determines how much money they make is not their economy size or how prosperous their population is, it's how much oil they get out of the ground and how much people pay them for that stuff, and right now that number is going down. This means that there are theoretically some gains for anyone who uses oil. The famous example is petrol and diesel, because petrol is likely to go down from about £1.36 to about £1.30, and therefore theoretically the knock-on effects of that is that anything that involves transport should also get about 4 to 5% cheaper. So there's gains for oil users, and as Trump is quick to point out, also anyone who has put tariffs on, whether that is the US or whether that is counter tariffs, is going to start bringing in billions of dollars a week. Also, inflation does seem to be down, which that seems very handy to her. What a great time it is. And even better, so now while we're talking about gainers, anyone who uses oil is gaining, and anyone who wants to buy products to or from Zimbabwe. They are the first country to crumble under the US tariffs, and they've said, okay, look, we're just going to cancel all our tariffs on US goods, and so now America-Zimbabwe trade has about $111 million. That's right, with an M. With an M. That's not $1,000 million worth of trade that will no longer be tariffed, which is, a pretty big deal. We're talking about triple-digit millions right there, which is, of course, very large when we're talking about global trade. And so, Zimbabwe, in theory, by global trade theory, by lowering their tariffs and hopefully getting their tariffs lowered in exchange, is going to have slightly better trade, and therefore Zimbabwe's economy is one to be bullish about if these, tariffs are responded to. So far, there hasn't been an official response from Trump about who is it, what he actually specifically wants from countries and what's going on. In fact, one of the fun things is that usually, the news has like political insiders who know what's going on. What I think is interesting is the economics editor for the BBC here basically says, as one G7 negotiator said yesterday, they don't know whether any senior officials really know the president's intentions. Indeed, there's been a big split within his own, inner circle about this one, because a lot of people are down with like the idea of tariffs. Even a billionaire Trump backer has warned of economic nuclear winter. But anyone who is involved in business knows that international trade is just a key part of getting it done. Therefore, as a result, the only winners that I can easily point to are anyone who doesn't like Trump, because this is looking unpopular even amongst those closest to him, anyone who is trading goods between the US and Zimbabwe, anyone who is using oil, which to be fair is actually a decent percent of people, and interestingly also, something you might have spotted here, and that is being widely reported, but kind of is a little bit of a mess is that there are certain currencies that are gaining. So if we look at the pound versus the dollar, all the news will talk about how, yeah, in times of uncertainty, money's going, the dollar's fallen against the euro, the yen, and the British pound, but that's not actually quite true. The pound was gaining against the dollar, 1.31, so $1. One pound is equal to $1.31. The pound has been higher than the dollar for a long time, but in particular, we got very close to parity in 2022. We've since come out of that dip, but we're still a long way to go till our like pre-heights, right? But what's interesting is for most currencies, gaining or losing value are both kind of equally undesirable. And so in the case of the Switzerland economy, they're going to have some issues in that now, as the Swiss franc gains against the dollar, as it actively is, people are trying to move their money out of dollars and into safer currencies. The franc is an easy one, and the Japanese yen is another surprising one. But pro tip, if you put your money in Japanese yen 5 years ago, it would be worth 0.01 if we just round up. Now it's worth 0.068. So it's known as like a safe currency, but like I would definitely put the air quotes around safe on that one. Whereas the Swiss franc is actually a much better example of this. I think this is the number most Americans understand better. $1 used to be worth just 100 yen. Now it's worth 146. In fact, it used to be worth as low as 80 yen in 2011. Man, America really went through some interesting things with its currency, right? I didn't realize, I always just assumed that it's the pound that fell since 2011. I didn't realize that it was the dollar that just fell to make that happen. Anyway, so what's interesting about this is that the US is going through a bit of an interesting moment, and money is flowing outwards towards safer currency havens. But for Japan and for Switzerland, this actually does have some downsides. The biggest one of those downsides is that now, as Switzerland their currency is worth more, it means that foreigners have to spend more of their money to get francs. If I wanted a franc in 2005, I would just have to give them, or rather, I guess, if I wanted a dollar from a franc in 2005, I'd get 0.75. Now I get 1.17. So it's easier for Swiss people to buy American goods, but harder for Americans to buy Swiss goods. Because if we reverse the exchange here, you can see that the amount of francs you get for your dollar has gone down drastically, which means that actually Americans buying Swiss goods suffer, while Swiss people buying American goods gain, right? That's the idea behind that. But what's interesting is the UK is one of the few currencies where when it goes up, we actually are in like the objectively clear. We have gone down sharply this morning. I don't know whether that is a extended trend or not, but because the UK's balance of trade is negative, we import more than we export. And so if people have more expensive things from us, or rather we import more than we export, and so when we get things for cheaper, that's good. Exporters in the UK will suffer a little bit, but importers, which is the majority of us, is great. Also interesting, by the way, just I really want to point this out. Everyone's talking about tariffs, and I think this is like a real big debate, but the thing that I just want to dive into that I think everyone misses is that Trump is kind of stuck in this like 90s logic of the idea that like, yeah, the US currently buys more physical goods from other countries than it sells. Trump claims this is unfair and bad for the country. The tariffs are intended to reduce this imbalance and bring more jobs to the US. This is something I think we all fall into when you look at trade on a surface level. You know, when the UK trades with Switzerland, we send over our, Cornish pasties and they send back their Swiss cheese, right? It's easy to think about trade as being physical things, but we are in a world now where services has dominated the world economy for a very long time. And so, even though we talk about tariffs and how they're bad for the UK, although actually we've got the lowest tariff rate, what's interesting is most of our trade is immune from it because it's services. We sell very few goods. We import way more goods than we export. The only reason the trade balance is anywhere close to neutral is because as a country, we export so many services. You can probably actually spot this in your day-to-day life. Sure, I'm surrounded by physical things, be that, a poker chip or a Grimace McDonald's toy. I might be surrounded by physical things, but actually most of what you spend your money on is kind of more conceptual, right? A great example of that might be, these examples, I guess, are financial products, but the day-to-day person isn't buying a lot of those. But like when you go out to a restaurant, are you buying food or are you buying the great service that comes at the McDonald's? No, the Tim Hortons. Come on here, we can do better than this. The Avanti Coast Trains first class lounge. There's a lot of things that are a good attached to a service, and so you kind of just assume it's the good. But there's a reason that we don't buy the cheapest version of some things. It's because we like the service that comes along with some things. And basically, the move toward seeing the world as a goods-only economy is something that is very valid in places that have lost their manufacturing. I think Ontario in Canada and the Rust Belt of the United States particularly feel this, and so this is really good political campaigning for those areas in theory. And it's really good for anyone who needs oil, and it's really bad for anyone who doesn't, so that's really good, I guess. But I think that realizing that what the world actually does now as services is what makes these tariffs just bite slightly less than before. But again, if you are a Nike, if you're any company that exports or deals with world things, you can just expect that things are going to be painful for a little bit. So, Volkswagen, Audi holding back cars arriving to the US. Because of the 25% tariffs on cars. Right now, if you are an Audi or a Volkswagen, if you're a Jaguar Land Rover or a Nissan, you have a really hard decision to make, which is effectively, do you lose some of your market share, or do you, like Nissan, consider shifting some of your production to the USA? The US can gain if everyone goes, oh yeah, these tariffs are too high, and the US is such a great market to do business with that we already wanted to move over there. This is the tipping factor. But if it's the tipping factor to saying, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be involved there, then it's hard. This is why no other country could get away with even trying tariffs, in my opinion. Can the US get away with it? I mean, historically speaking, no. If we look at the tariffs of 1824, they were known as the Tariff of Abominations, and eventually indicted a crisis because of how they affected the North and South differently. If we look at the 1930s, the Tariffs Act signed into a law by President Hoover, a Republican, interestingly enough. So many parallels to Trump if you want to look into it. But what's interesting is there were tariffs raised there, and the idea was to protect American industries from foreign competition because the Great Depression was just getting started. But what actually happened is, even though everyone said this would go very poorly, senior economists particularly, everyone said, yep, this was a policy misstep and it had to be replaced by a reciprocal trade agreement of 1934. Is that basically just the aim for Trump too, to spend the next 4 years negotiating on trade, slightly suffering domestically, but doesn't really matter if the long-term gain is good? And I think if every country eventually decides on the Zimbabwe strategy, you actually could have the world come out much wealthier. But in the meantime, what's the opposite of a really good time? You might just be looking forward to one of those as a world economy. But let's hope not. Let's stay optimistic. That actually, this is all just a goof. It's an April Fool's Day joke that's going on just a little bit too long. But yeah, who's to say for sure? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to make the thumbnail now, because the interesting idea is most countries, most countries, most country, I'm gonna do it like I've got an English deficiency. Most countries are seeing their stocks go down. Yeah, look at that. It's going real down. Look how bad it is. But some countries, get this right. So if we now, I'll make my green arrow much straighter. But some countries are seeing their situation improve. Again, if anyone uses oil, it's going to be about 5% cheaper once prices trickle down. And if anyone is invested in Switzerland, good news for you also. You're about 2% richer than you were before. And so for these countries, that is to say Switzerland. How do you draw a Swiss flag? I'll go red for Switzerland. I'll go red for Japan too. So this is Switzerland right here. And this is Japan right here. As you can see, yeah, that's great. That's perfect. I think if I just fill this in now. Is that a Swiss flag? That looks like an English flag. Is it the other way around? Is this the Swiss flag? No, I think that's an English flag again. But anyway, with that said, let's now fill this in. Slightly darker green. Look how nice this is. Yeah, this is the thumbnail today. I've been testing so much with thumbnails, internet. By the way, I said this would be my last Daily Slot video. I'm sorry for lying to you. But I've been testing thumbnails, and even these two. I literally have a penguin with an arrow pointing to it saying 50.1% tariff, and somehow it's got basically the same percent as the previous one. So to test that YouTube's thumbnail test isn't just pure random, I'm going to upload this same thumbnail twice. Once it will look like this, and once I'll put like a little dot in there. So it looks all like there. So that it looks the exact same, but different. So which thumbnail do you think will do better? This thumbnail or this thumbnail? It's too different. I need it to be like literally, there we go. So this thumbnail or this thumbnail? Which do you think will do better? Place your guesses down below. and I'll see you in the next one. You know, I'll see you in about 4 years on the other side of this this great impression that we're about to go through. And then I'll also see you in the 21-24s when the US goes through another round of tariffs. I literally saw this in a Reddit post and I just thought it was so fun that, yeah, every 100 years, the US just gets this strong desire to tariff the world. And to be fair, you know, the US has grown a lot since 1824. They've even grown a lot since the 1934. And so maybe third time's the charm. Who's to say? Anyway, with that said, thank you for watching. You know, do you want to know why I was in Rio? I just wanted to see what Rio looked like, you know? It's one of those cities everyone tells you, like, oh yeah, it's got one of the highest crime rates, but just like, don't be in public anywhere near dark and you'll be fine. So I figured I'd look around it. You know, how about we all just go to Rio and wait for this to all blow over? How does that sound? Ooh, it has trams. Oh, look at that. I got a good tram system going on. Oh yeah, that's a cool looking tram. You gonna get mugged on the tram? I hope not. Anyway, with that said, thank you for watching. Ooh, what is this sign saying? 25. Make sure to get on the 25 tram in Rio de Janeiro, unless that was a speed limit. Yeah, look. Yeah. Anyway, with that, actually, you know, should we go look at the Cristo Redentor? I'm probably not gonna go here myself too soon, but let's. Is that okay? There's some people waving at the Google car. Let's go and look at Cristo Redentor. I'm sure there's a photosphere somewhere around here. No, come on, guys. I want to look at my iconic Christ statue atop a mountain. There we go. Did someone take it from on top of the statue? Come on, that's not what we need. Anyway, second channel, don't care. Have a good morning. Goodbye.